Thank you for staying with us. The first leg of this conversation this morning is on education, and a lot has been happening in the sector. And last week, there was the development of the new curriculum that was put up by the Federal Ministry of Education, talking about the streamlining of some subjects that will be taken by primary school pupils and, of course, their secondary school counterparts, technical, those in technical institutions as well, and the introduction of, tech-driven subject, robotics, AI, and all of those things, into the curriculum, especially public-owned institutions, government-owned institutions, rather. And see, smarting from that, many talked about if it's feasible at this time, the workability, the intention, which many persons said maybe quite noble, quite good, but are we ready? Especially when the government said it's meant to start this September, this new academic session. Are we ready for that? Do we have enough hands, manpower, to juggle that, to make it work, even when some states are saying they don't have the blueprint yet from the federal government so as to align in that way. How about the issue of power? Because you're talking about tech, then you're talking about power, you're talking about internet, you're talking about infrastructure, computers, especially in the nooks and crannies. Some will even say, even in the state capitals, how many of those schools are captured that you think this is ready? The issue of the CBT being that would be the next thing to be used by WAEC, Nigerian Office, West African Examination Council is still there. And they are saying by 2026, the paper and pen type of examination will be dropped and it will be full CBT. Are we really ready for that? While looking to those possibilities, at the weekend, the news emerged that the best graduating student, in Sokoto State, I'm trying to get his name now, at Usmanu Danfodio University, the best graduating student, Sheriff Abdullahi, that's Udus in Sokoto, as what he got as gift for his brilliance is a fully sponsored trip to Saudi Arabia for pilgrimage. Many persons are saying excusers, pilgrimage being the result, being the award given the best graduating student, that's in academics now, being given a gift. The gift is a pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia. Is that commensurate? Does that connote award for excellence? Actually, because I, for one, and many persons have been trying to say maybe that's just one of those gifts to the man to encourage him. Some will say maybe he needs to get closer to God to maintain his status. Or some will say maybe that wasn't what got him there. I'm talking about the priority on education, looking from what we had, the budget on education now to this. Now, a few weeks before, now, you remember, a few weeks ago rather, a particular student, a female teenager, 17-year-old, who did well in London in English language, who was given a paltry sum of 200,000 naira, where dignitaries, Federal Ministry of Education, State Ministry of Education from Yobe State, they were there, and many persons, 200,000 naira for one best in English language for that category that were held in an English-speaking country in London, only for the government to, say, hello, that gift was given by the Minister of Education, not the government. In fact, the ministry said they don't have any budget to award anybody anything. If you have done well, you'll be recognized, as she was recognized, and that was the national honor you are getting. The gift is just from the pocket of the Minister of Education, and that is why we are chewing that. We are here again, and his name again is Sheriff Abdullahi, and that is why we are. That was done during the unit. It wasn't even a private arrangement. This was made on Saturday during the university's 42nd convocation ceremony held at his main campus right here in Sokoto. And by the way, the young man graduated with an impressive cumulative grade point, average of 4.92, and the governor described it as among the highest. And the governor talked about what he has done in education and all of those things. But here we are. We have with us this morning Jacob Sile. Jacob Sile is an education enthusiast and the executive director of iRead Believe Initiative. He joins us from the United States of America. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Jacob.
Good morning, Femi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. My country, your country, we are talking about education, the priority on education, recent development, and the latest being Abdullahi being given, an award, a gift for his brilliance, 4.92 cumulative GPA, to go on pilgrimage, in Saudi Arabia. These are the issues. Your impression?
Thank you so much, Femi. First, I want to congratulate Abdullahi for graduating as the overall best student from his university, considering the kind of educational system we have in Nigeria. To be very frank with you, the government should not be rewarding the best graduate students with a trip for Hajj. The message in which that is sending is that if you excel in Nigeria, I believe the message that should be sending should be that, or the message that gift should be sending is that when you graduate in Nigeria, we are only going to invest in ceremonial things. I would expect that the government or the governor of that state would have taken the bull by the horn, saying, okay, this is our standing graduates. We should be investing in scholarships for you for a doctoral program or a master's program, looking for internship skills and not rewarding Abdullahi with a Hajj trip. I think it is below the belt. It is a misplaced priority, and I think that the government can do more. Encourage the governor in its wisdom to reconsider that tokenism and make sure that people and students are rewarded for their hard work and not just by a one-time trip to perform a spiritual exercise. Those would be my initial reactions for now.
All right, Mr. Sule. But some might say, let's look at this from this angle. The young man emerged best graduating student with 4.92 GPA. In that society, perhaps it's a communal thing. It's a cultural thing. Let me say it's a cultural thing. It is worthy of note that the governor himself is an alumnus of the same university. So some people might say perhaps he's just trying to, show support, solidarity, using something that, resonates with them in that community, in their culture. That might not be, some people would say that might not be the only award going to this young man, but the governor just felt, oh, since he's also an alumnus of the institution, he felt proud of the boy, and of course he knows the cost of performing Hajj. So perhaps he believes that this will be something that will have a long-lasting effect on the young man. That's why he's sending him on that Hajj trip. So don't you think it's a cultural thing?
I like to be very careful when I make comments about cultural or religious beliefs in Nigeria. To the best of my understanding, I have read that reported as covered by many newspapers in Nigeria. There are no reports that suggest that that is one of the many gifts that the governor had presented to the best graduate students. If there are other gifts that has been presented, I have not read about that in any newspaper or any coverage from Nigeria. But we need to lay the facts bare, cultural or not, and I say this with all sense of respect.
All right.
Oh,
we'll
technical glitches there. Yeah. I was going to ask him. Yeah, before he landed, I was about to cut him to ask him that. Would he rather have the governor monetize that gift? Femi, just imagine, calculating what it will cost, because it's an all-expense paid trip to Saudi Arabia. That's quite much. So if you monetize it and ask the young man to choose, would the young man have chosen to go on that Hajj?
Well, what do we know? I think it cost an average, with what we know by advertisement, a lot of those things, that it cost around 8 million naira now for you to go on a pilgrimage, actually. So,
and that's a subsidized one.
Let's assume, I think I had an advert and it was being said, around here, people planning should have 8 million naira. And so, if actually 8 million naira was on the ground, and that's the question you were asking, and the guy was given an option of taking our cash to do whatever he wants with it. Yeah. And Hajj, and I think
would he have chosen that Hajj?
Well, we'll never find out. That's actually the thing. But then, just like you asked, maybe that's what that society recognizes
what they value
and
most.
value and all of those things. But then there are times that even, culture shift, actually, tradition shift. The tenets will stay there. But then there are times that, do you know, if you ask some people, and that might be the thought of many, that do you want to go to school? There are some children that will tell you they don't want to go to school because they don't just want to. But it's their parents that will prevail on them that you must go to school. The community might prevail on them that you must go to school. What I'm trying to say in essence is there are things that maybe it's okay, but then somebody who is an elite, an alumnus of that school, the governor himself, and many people in power might feel, okay, maybe this is what people might want. There is something, in inverted commas now, better that you can have for you to keep this brilliance, because it's a gift actually, and so you can't dictate what people give people. It's a gift, not like, okay, it's a promise or something. But then what I've been, just like Jacob said, what I've been trying to see, and I've researched so wide even to this morning, is to see maybe that is just one of many gifts. To say, okay, this for you, scholarship for you, and these, and then you get this. Maybe it's just cherry picking by reporters to, make it look the way it is right now. But that is the best information, the latest that we have right now about this. And it's not, this is just one of many. Actually, on this program, we'll talk about when students, like the best graduating student, are in some schools, graduate, and they are being given 10,000, 20,000 by the school or the department.
Some of them will spend it on drinks on the spot.
Professor, Tunji Oguyemi said, as far as OAU, one of the foremost universities in the land, Obafemi University is concerned, he says some of those things, is due to the laws governing the institution since the time it was created. So maybe that was the price that was given, that was stipulated in the laws of the, governing that university at that time. But then it means that if we are serious, we can't continue to say, oh, it's because of that law.
They have a Senate in the university. They should review it.
Yeah, there is a Senate that will feel, no, this is belittling. How do you mean? For that kind of university, and then you have, is the way the thing is even present. Now, we understand Jacob is back. Can you hear us, Jacob?
Yes, I can.
All right. You are going to land on your phone.
Yeah, my apologies. I think my internet went out. So what I was trying to say was that personally, I have read that reportage that was issued by many Nigerian newspapers. I have not seen where any reportage has said that there were other prices or other things that were added to what the governor had said. But above all, I think we need to do better as a country. The message in which the governor was trying to pass, which he probably might not be aware of, is saying that if you excel in Nigeria, we will not invest in your dreams. What we're just going to do is to send you on Hajj. But on the contrary, I think the governor of the state, I know maybe it was just out of his kind gesture, regardless of whether or not he's an alum of the school or even as the principal visitor of the school, we should find a way to encourage education in Nigeria. When people graduate as top of a university, not top of a department or faculty, we should not be rewarding that gesture with Hajj. We should be looking on how we can prioritize the future of young people in Nigeria. Many young persons are leaving Nigeria as a result of brain drain and all that. We must start rewarding excellence with opportunities and not ceremonies. And the gesture of the governor respectfully reflects the kind of crisis that we have rocking our university education in Nigeria. We glorify achievement, we glorify one-stop event, but we fail to invest in the quality of our education. What is wrong if the government can spend a lot of money to invest in a scholarship for this young man who has spent maybe 4 or 5 years getting that degree? How about if we now begin to develop and invest in the capacity of our young people rather than investing in or recycling short-term things just to catch media airlines? I think what the governor has done is a misplaced priority, and like I said, I want to stand corrected to say that maybe that was one of the many things in which the governor had promised to fulfill, but I do hope that is not. But at the end of the day, I hope that the governor takes a critical look at this, and regardless of cultural bias or what have you, we must begin to reward our graduates with professional development and not just a one-hour trip to the Holy Land to go and pray. What happens when a young man comes back from the trip?
It becomes a cleric. It becomes Alaji. They call him Alaji, and that might be a major achievement for him. That's on a lighter note anyway. All right, Mr. Sule, just before we lost that connection, I was going to ask you, would you rather have the government of Sokoto, the governor of Sokoto, what if he had monetized that gifts, that Hajj trip, that full expense paid Hajj trip? So what if he had monetized it and given the young man the monetary equivalent of that gift? Would that have been a better option?
To be very frank with you, I think that would have been a fair option, because the cost of a round trip to Hajj would not be less than *1 million naira. And if this young man is somebody who has a focus on what is...
It's like you've left Nigeria a long time ago. You're saying *1 million naira?
I think I meant it cannot be less than *1 million naira.
It's actually close to 10 million naira. Close to 10 million.
Wow.
It's around
so,
million, yeah.
My apologies for that. You know, it's been a while that I traveled for yeah. So I mean, 10 million naira is a huge sum of money. If you give an overall graduate student of a Nigerian university 10 million naira, that money can go a long way. It's either to become your own principal, set up an organization, pursue a professional development, maybe a doctoral program or a master's degree. But I think the money will have gone a long way if the governor had considered rewarding or even giving this young man a cash prize. But sending a young man for a Hajj trip, well, like you said, maybe the young man is interested in becoming a cleric. Even regardless of that, the message the governor or the Sokoto State is sending to its young people is not appropriate. We should not take education as something with levity. We must reward education with solid prizes and not just one Hajj trip to the Holy Land to perform Hajj.
All right. And, you know, apart from this, we talk about the priority and even the push of the government. And I like your thought, because I'm sure you are somebody passionate about education, the state of education. Even if you are not on ground here, you're always on ground, in a manner of speaking. Now, the government is pushing. The Federal Minister of Health released, made a press release talking about this new session and what will be obtainable subject in trade, at least one Nigerian language, and then robotics, AI, some of those tech-driven subjects will now be introduced to our primary and secondary and technical, education and institutions in Nigeria. I need your assessment on that and the workability, of this intention, because they have said it's starting this same September, this same academic session.
I think this new policy by the Honorable Minister of Education is a very promising policy, and we must commend the federal government for championing this initiative. I think largely we need to understand that, from what I read, this policy comes under the part of trying to ensure that the curriculum of Nigeria is being reviewed, and this is something that hasn't been done within the past 15 years. I have also read that this policy is anchored under the banner of a lighter load and to help them build their minds. To be very honest with you,
if you to be future ready.
Yes, that's why I said this sounds promising, and we must give kudos to the government where it is necessary. I don't know if you recall, a few months ago when this minister was appointed, I wrote a slitching article saying that we do not need medical doctors to prescribe prescriptions for education ministry, and that we need policy experts. And to be very frank with you, I must say that the minister had turned out to be an outstanding appointee by Mr. President, and we must give kudos to him. what does this new policy intends to do? It intends from the intention of what I read from the minister to improve the quality of education in Nigeria, and by limiting the number of courses in which our students have been taking over the years. Now, if you look at the breakdown of those policies, before now, from primary classes, we have students taking about 20 courses. This new policy intends, from what I read, to make sure that students now take between 9 to 10 subjects within a term, which is quite commendable. And not just only the reduction of the courses, the direction in which the minister had said that these courses will be going to make our young students become future ready. But my challenge or question about this policy is, Nigeria is big on policy. We talk a lot about policy, but the implementation is actually my question. How do we ensure that these policies are followed through, and not just another political statement that are made, but ensure that the implementation, are done accordingly, and we have skilled manpower? And the only way I believe we can do this is by properly investing in the teaching capacity of our teachers. Our teachers must be trained and adequately remunerated. That's one. Okay. But when you look at the secondary aspect of this policy, it says that they are now reducing from 12 subjects to now 14. From 14 or thereabout to 12 and 9. What does this say? It showed that the minister, or probably the Ministry of Education, is now thinking beyond the future and making sure that our kids are becoming prepared for the future ahead, which is quite interesting. So on this note, I'm not somebody who takes break for government, but where you see a government making an attempt to do well, I think it is worthy of note to recognize that, and I must congratulate the Ministry of Education and the minister. Considering this position.
Mr. Sile, all right, before you congratulate them, a lot of Nigerians think otherwise. We had an expert on the show just last week, I guess on Friday, we talked about it here. Unfortunately, Mr. Sile, this seems just like a policy statement by the government. So far, there is no groundwork. There is no verifiable groundwork as far as this policy is concerned. And this policy is meant to, be implemented starting from this new session. Some schools have resumed already. I spoke with some people in Abuja. Some schools have resumed already as we speak. So the government is releasing a policy which will be implemented the same month without any groundwork whatsoever. In fact, Mr. Sile, a lot of these schools a lot of state governments have not been officially communicated with. The policy has not been communicated to them officially. So how serious are we in this aspect? So, because it's one thing, according to some people, these documents can actually be generated through AI. Now the government is trying to include artificial intelligence, AI, robotics into the curriculum. How ready are we? You started answering some of the questions yourself, talking about the manpower. Do we have the skilled manpower? And one major aspect I would like us to look at, Mr. Sile, is budgeting. How do we value our education sector in Nigeria? Right now, our education budget is still around 5%, 5.47%, which is a far cry from what is recommended by UNESCO, about 15 to 20%. So should we really be congratulating the government of Nigeria for just releasing a policy statement?
Thank you, Emeka. If you listen to the direction in which I came from, I said I'm somebody who don't take brief for government. And I want to situate this conversation in a very narrow perspective. I have read that policy, and like I said, we must recognize an intention of a government or the minister who seems to want to be doing things differently. I've also expressed my concerns about the implementation gaps, how those policies will be implemented. You made a comment that the document, or the said policy document, was probably generated by AI. We need to be very careful about whether or not AI was used to
I said, Mr. Sile, I said an expert, one of our resource persons, said it is something that can be generated. Some people are of the opinion that it's not a big deal to have that document, that it can be generated. That's the point.
I mean, well, I do not want to cast aspersion on the expert. I'm not an AI policy expert, but I think what I'm much more concerned about is the government is at least considering or making an intention to actually work on the educational system in which we have in Nigeria. It is also sad that you have just mentioned that schools are already in session, and now these policies are just, like I said, I don't want to make comments that would make us say, oh, these folks are just talking. If indeed the government is actually interested in revising the curriculum of Nigeria, this should not be done once a school year has started, or maybe when, like you said, there are no proper groundwork. If that is the case, I think there's a room for the government to sit back and not just be in a hurry, like I said, to make political statements. I have read that policy, to be very honest with you. The intention is worthy of note. It's a very sound policy. But like I've said, I'm very concerned about the policy. Do we have the resources and the manpower to implement these policies? If the answer is no, then I think that the government or the ministry or whoever is championing this policy must take a step back and see how we can actually work around with all stakeholders and make sure that this policy is properly implemented. It is a very solid policy. Many years ago, we did not have ministers like this who had their thinking cap on. But I just hope that with the shortcomings in which many persons and experts have raised about this policy document, the ministry would actually take a step back and see how they can review the gaps and work with those critical organizations or stakeholders to make sure that these policies are implemented. Come on, Emeka, how would you feel when those years when I was in secondary school in Nigeria, I was taking close to 16, 17 courses, and many of those courses were not even with transferable skills that could help me in the next phase of my academic sojourn. But when we see an intention from the Ministry of Education like what we're seeing right now, and the government is thinking about the future to make our kids future ready, I think the best we can do is to, yes, criticize appropriately, but also recognize the effort and intention in which the government is making. I have done education work for the past 2 decades, so when I see something like this that shows that there is probably light at the end of the tunnel, we must acknowledge efforts that are being made, but also stand up and hold government to account where those policies are just being made as political statements. That is when we must now begin to ask questions. Why are we making this? What is the intention behind these policies? If these policies are just mere political statements to just catch headlines, I think the government needs to do well. But overall, with what I've read, I hope that the government goes through, work with every person's in need, the government needs, and make sure that this policy is properly implemented. Now, beyond implementation, we should not be able to do quarterly review. Before the policy was implemented, where were we? When the policy was implemented, what have we achieved? And the aftermath of the policy, these are things in which we should not, because I don't just want to believe that we just want to cast aspersion on government, but where the government is actually making an attempt to make sure that the education system is better, I think we should cut government a slack.
So Mr. Sile, sorry to cut in. So your point is, which I quite understand, it is a great policy, of course. I've gone through it as
Absolutely.
well. It's a great policy if well implemented. That's your point.
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. Now, talking about the state of education in Nigeria, the primary, the secondary policy, good intention. Many of some of our discussants here last week too said, good one, a matter of intent and what it looks like, but the workability, because anybody can throw any policy around. And the shocking part for them is the fact that why throw it or why put it up? It was released earlier last week, actually, the same September, and you want it to run. There are many schools that for years, they are not even powered. So how can this be? When I mean power, they don't have access to electricity. The basic introductory technology, they are still doing it the old way. Some of them don't even have teachers. Some schools are even making do with the private arrangement of the PTA teachers, the way we call them around here. Some of them have, many persons, and now the government is saying this is what we are going to do. And I think that is where the pessimism is coming from, to say, they have come in the Nigerian parlance. They have come to say, or let us just have something to talk about. They are not serious. But you have said, let's wait for them. But my parting shot on this topic is this. We are holding the federal government accountable. How about state governments? What are they doing? You know, and talking about Sokoto, many of the states, I think maybe Kano, okay, sorry, I'm quoted wrongly now. Some 4 other states shut down during Ramadan, actually. And now, when you see the way we do things around here, and because they are the ones in charge, they shut it down just because of fasting, and even some other some persons say even some of these Arab nations, some of these other nations that are religious, equally as religious, they shut down entirely the way we run it. And you see the way we are approaching education, a priority placed on it. Some will say, maybe we are not ready, and it's not looking like we are ready. I'd like you to speak to state government, the way they are running education. Even Osun State here, an application to recruit teachers was put up last year, February, till now. Nothing on it. The best we have, it's some kind of arrangement called the Mole Corps. They are the ones, you know, and the state governments have explained it away, economic issues, financial issues, and here we have. What do you think the state government needs to be doing so that we just don't trace everything on the doorstep of the people in Abuja?
My understanding is education in Nigeria is on the concurrent legislative list and not on the exclusive list. What that means is that the government, both at the federal and state level, that is the federal and state level, can actually make policies on education, on how it is funded at the state level, and the federal government can legislate exclusively on how education is funded at the federal level. It is not gainsaying that we have not really paid attention to funding education properly in Nigeria. For many years, the federal government and the state government have not really paid critical attention to how education is being funded in Nigeria. While we must distinguish what the state governor can do and what the federal government can do, there is a large gap in how we fund education and how policies are done. And it is rather unfortunate that we now run a system where people cherry pick on what to fund and what not to fund. And, you know, just to put this in proper perspective, we need to do more when it comes to education funding in Nigeria, whether at the state or federal level. A nation cannot thrive when its education is not properly funded. And so far, the Nigerian government has not done exceedingly well when it comes to funding education. We put in so much money on other things, insecurities. Now the question is, how long do we continue to put money in these things when the root cause is not addressed? If you continue to put money on insecurities and you are not addressing the cause of insecurities, we're not going to achieve anything. So I want to encourage the government, while we continue to fight insecurities, Boko Haram, Fulani herdsmen, IPOB, or what have you, the core of this thing is illiteracy, poverty. The government should invest judiciously and aggressively in education, fund policies, get children off the schools, work with state governments, work with local counterparts, and make sure that education is properly funded. A nation that does not fund its education is sitting on a it's sitting on a gunpowder, and it will only take a matter of time before all of this will explode. So I encourage the government, either at the local, state, or federal level, to consciously fund education so that our universities, our school system would work creditably, and we won't have to put in so much money in supporting our education into fighting insecurity. On a closing note, state government has a responsibility to fund state universities, and that must be done without any apologies, and making sure that schools are properly funded and our schools are secure for children. And when I talk about funding of schools, we must also consider the interests of our lecturers and teachers, secondary school teachers, primary school teachers at all ends. not just focusing on the university teachers, primary school teachers as well must be judiciously and adequately remunerated. And in doing this as well, we must ensure that we recruit qualified teachers from the primary to the university levels to make sure that things are done appropriately, and we're not just getting people who are unemployed and because there are no jobs wants to be a teacher. We must get people who are qualified and are skilled and certified to be teachers to be able to run a university education and a tertiary, primary, and secondary education in Nigeria. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Sule. There's one thing I would like you to address. We just in 1 minute. In as much as we are trying to, be innovative, I mean, include some forms of innovation in our curriculum. Don't you think even where we are right now, if you look at science education, it's in a very poor state. We are not getting it at all. So are we really ready to move into AI and robotics when we are not even, if you go to a lot of schools, a lot of secondary schools, they don't even have laboratories, functional science laboratories. So my point is, science education in Nigeria right now is abysmal, it's suffering. So if we cannot get basic science education right, the government is not saying anything about it. And we want to go to the next level. How sincere are we as a people?
Emeka, that question is actually a very great question. And to be very honest with you, it bothers me when, I think it's a Nigerian thing where we try to show solidarity to everything in which the world is doing, and we neglect the basics. Like I said, the core foundation of education in Nigeria requires a lot that still needs to be done. The foundation is broken, just like the Bible says, what can the righteous do? Before we continue exploring AI, which is good, I love AI, very fantastic, we need to get the basics right. Our foundation, like you said, our science education must be in a direction that can embrace AI. If not, AI would come as a tool people will misuse AI and become very, very dependent on it. But if we get the foundation right, if there are proper investment and science education is treated as it should, I don't think that we would have a challenge. But if the foundation is not properly done, if schools are not funded, if experts are not recruited to lead that ministry, if people who even have the understanding of science education are not championing those policies, I am very I'm very concerned about how Nigeria can successfully implement AI policy. But nevertheless, there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of work has been done. The direction looks promising, and I hope at the end of the day, we have a country and an educational system in which we are all proud of. The goal is to have a system that is credible. The goal is to have an educational system that can cater to the needs of Nigeria in future to come. And I hope that someday we can get there. And if there's any way we can support, we will be more than happy to support the government of Nigeria and make sure that Nigeria's education is properly funded and headed to the right direction.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. Mr. Jacob Sule, lawyer and youth advocate. Thank you for joining us on the segment this morning.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we dive into other matters. Join us again.